Thank you so much for staying tuned. Now, despite the fact that Africa has been bedeviled by so many challenges, talking about political challenges, talking about economic challenges, talking about security challenges, still Africa seems to be pulling the interest of developed countries. I really want to come into Africa to invest. I don't like saying that. It's like Africa or Africans can't just see what these persons or group of countries are seeing in Africa. Now, it's like the world powers are leaving their shores to come to African countries. The big question now is why the interest in Africa, despite the negative news emanating from this great continent of ours, despite the security challenges, despite the recessive nature of things, why are they still very much interested in Africa? Now, that question has been going on for quite a while, and some persons have been able to profile answers or solutions to some of these bedeviling questions, while others are still wondering, if Africa is so important, how come the leaders just can't see it? Anyway, with me here in the studio to really do justice to this discussion, I have a legal practitioner here with me in the studio. Please join me or welcome Barrister Louis Ojomo. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me. Hello, viewers.
So he's a political analyst. When we talk about business also, he's well-grounded. International, local politics, he's well-grounded. Well, you saw the second man, Honorable A. Igariba. We talk about business, politics, human rights activism. Believe you me, he is there. International, local politics, he's well-grounded. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, viewers.
All right. Now, the Commonwealth Business Forum has come and gone, but it's like interest is still very much in Africa, talking about our security apparatus and our economic drive. I really want to start off from this platform. Why the interest in Africa? Despite the fact that some people are like saying our colonial masters, they were the one that really undermined Africa. They were the one that siphoned our resources. They were the one that underdeveloped Africa. Still, we are going back to them, and they are interested in Africa. Despite what we have, our leaders seems not to know what we have. Could you please take it up from there?
You know, Africa undeniably is first in the world. If you look as far back as the slave trade, when you say that why has there been this interest in Africa, there has always been interest in Africa right from the start. The Industrial Revolution in Europe was achieved on the back of Africa in terms of the human resources that were moved from here across the Atlantic to foster the Industrial Revolution. I think that is really where everything began. And after the slave trade ended, again at the behest of the same people who came to take the slaves, there was now the interest not in human slavery anymore, but economic slavery. Again, Africa is another huge resource for the world in terms of natural resources, in terms of minerals, in terms of agriculture, in terms of financial viability and huge return on investment. The African region currently remains the most profitable region for return on investment by foreign investors. Africa remains the hub for the highest return on investment in the whole world. And of course, we know in Africa, labor is very cheap. In Europe, in America, we talk in terms of per hour, how much you earn per hour. In Africa, we talk in terms of what you earn per month. So labor here is very cheap. It's even cheaper because our exchange rate is low. So for these and many reasons, Africa remains the hub for investment by foreign bodies. The issue we have to now look at is these investments that are being made in Africa. How much of it is benefiting Africa? I think this is the question. We see Chinese, we see Japanese, we see Americans, we see Germans, we see Italians, Britons. Everybody is in Africa. The issue is that a lot of these people who are coming to invest in Africa are, however, not benefiting Africa. This is just a simple issue that we're having. Africa is blessed. You look at our resources: timber, palm oil, rubber, mineral resources. Let's not even talk about the oil that is creating so much laziness in the continent. We have uranium, platinum, copper, gold, diamonds, you name it. We have it here in Africa. These are resources that the world needs. Therefore, Africa has been and is and will continue to be a major hub for foreign investments and foreign investors. As I say again, the issue is, with all of these investments, we only have about 4.3% of our GDP achieved through those who are investing in this country. That is a shocking figure. When you look at the amount of foreign participation in this country, our GDP from foreign investments is only 4.3%. That tells you, let me give you an analogy. Imagine I'm a farmer, so I have a yam farm, for example, and that in my yam farm, I ask you to come and do some labor on the farm. And out of our yield, 100% of the yield, I, as the farm owner, I only get 4.3%.
Okay.
There's no person who does business, and then after investing in your business, you only get 4.3% as profit. That is a ridiculous amount, but that is what is happening, for example, in Nigeria. In fact, in Africa, that is the figure of the cumulative figure of Africa, that from foreign investments we are getting 4.3%. What happens to the other 90-something percent is going back, is capital flight back to those countries. Let us say, for example, now we have the Chinese in this country at the moment. If you go to the Chinese factory just by the bypass here in Benin, as an example, the workforce there, the only place you will see Nigerians in that place are maybe as security guards.
Okay, now you just hold on as security guards, because now you're talking about the exploitative nature of well-developed country or developed countries. Anyway, I'll come back to you on that. Now, Honorable here has spoken at length, giving us a solid foundation for this discourse. What's your take? Why the interest in Africa? From what he had done, he's talking about exploitation. You have 4%. What about the capital flight that leaves out the shores of Africa to these countries? But they are talking about having interest in developing Africa economically, and of course, talking about security.
Well, I think, thank you very much for having me. I think for obvious reasons, it is in the interest of the West that Africa largely remains undeveloped. And I said all of that to, say this. Firstly, they realized that Africa do not have what it takes to develop. And one of the very basics that, one of the basic features of a country, of a people that wants to develop, is to have reliable data. They found that Africa, we do not have data for a lot of things. So it's very easy for us to be shortchanged. I'll take your mind back to, there was quite a lot of hula baloo about the speech that President Buhari had made at the Commonwealth Business Summit. But of utmost importance to me was the figures that he brought out. A week before President Buhari left the country, the National Population Commission had come out to say that Nigeria had an estimated population of about 198 million. But in the speech of Mr. President, he chopped off as many as 18 million people. He said Nigeria has an average of 180 million people. What comes to mind is, are we actually planning for 180 people? Do we have a budget for 180 million people and 18, as many countries in Africa are not up to 18 million in population? So it's like not planning for a whole country, a whole people, 18 million. Then when the National Population Commission had come up with that figure, many people were asking obvious questions to the extent of, was there a census conducted? How did they come by those figures? Because people work in institutions, people work in different places, and there's been no sample, no survey carried out to get an approximate, figure. So how did they come by that figure? We've not had a census for God knows how long. So how did they come by the fact that we have 198 million? Then you go to the oil sector, for instance, where you have, which is the mainstay of the Nigerian economy. Till date, it's a soft spot for the oil companies, whether it's BP, whether it's Chevron, whether it's Schlumberger. They just want to come here. The reason is they who do the exploration are the ones that actually tell the Nigerian government, for instance, how much oil they found. We do not have the capacity to know what they found. It's what they tell us that we write down, we put down as the figures they found. Some years ago, in the Netherlands, what's the oil company now? Is it Shell? Is it the Shell?
It's Shell. Yeah.
Shell BP. They were found guilty of underpaying tax. And upon investigation, they found out, okay, your activities, the monies you've remitted in, is not tallying. Which means if your books have said that you dealt with 20 million barrels of oil, the resources in your account is showing probably that you have dealt with 40 billion barrels of oil. So they couldn't pay tax on the shortfall, but the money, however, was in their account. And basically, most of those oil came from Nigeria. So they take as much as they want. And my mom will say in our local parlance that the fastest way to become rich is when you deal with the fool at the other side. And because they find out that here, for instance, we have in Africa where my fellow discussant had said that, in returns on investment is probably one of the highest in the whole world, coming from Africa. And that's very correct to the extent that here you have in terms of data for browsing, for the use of internet, is the most expensive in the whole world. If you go to aviation, for instance, you have your aviation minister, who is not, of course there is a free market, but once there is a free market, there should also be competitive bargaining.
Okay, free market?
Yes.
Competitive bargaining. To
the extent that if we are all seated here, and there's a shirt on offer for 10,000 naira, and you can hear me tell Barrister or Mr. Lewis that the shirt is 10,000. I cannot at the same time be telling you it's 15,000. Because to your knowledge that I'm selling to him for 10,000 already. Right. So you have most of the European airlines coming to other parts of Africa as close as Ghana is for way lesser amount than what they fly into Nigeria for.
All right.
And unchallenged.
Okay. Okay, so both of you are agreeing to the fact that we are being exploited in Africa.
Obviously.
Okay, because from your own reason you talked about data collation. We don't have it, we don't know it, hence we've been played, so to speak. I'll come back to you. And just joining us right now in the studio is Anthony Ijewere, prof, and of course a lecturer. We're going to do business, political analysis, or political analysis of issues, both local and international. The man is well grounded. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much. Sorry for coming in late. You know the Nigerian system we are discussing here is part of the problem.
It's okay. It's all right. You've heard both of them. They've spoken at length, talking about countries being interested in coming to Africa to do business. Hence, the exploitative nature comes into play. He talked about the returns. He talked about data. What's your angle on this?
Well, it's most unfortunate because if you look at the economy of Japan, for example, 80% of their raw material are imported. Whereas this is Africa. with large amounts of mineral resources, yet we cannot make good use of it. The World Bank only a few days ago rolled out figures about the rate of development in African countries. Nigeria was tagged at 2.8 rate of development.
2.8?
2.8%, which is very, very poor. Meanwhile, we have a government who is singing the economy is perfectly in order and all that. Ethiopia had the highest rate of development, economic development, 8.9%. Other African countries are like Ghana, 5.6%, and so on and so forth. Nigeria had the least, of index of economic development. What does that imply? It means economically, most African countries are not doing well. And the country we thought, Ethiopia, we thought perhaps they should take the back seat, are the ones whose economy is progressing, doing very well. So what does that indicate? It means that the Nigerian economy is not well managed. And if you really go back to the background of why African countries seems to be less developed, is because the average African leader, if you go back to Idi Amin days, Gaddafi, and so on and so forth, you will discover that in Africa we had leadership problem. Okay, and the leadership problem is what is showing up in what you call economic development. We still remember Gandhi of India, how he turned around the economy. So there are many other leaders, but what they use is the leadership skill in them. That is the issue. But in most African countries, what you have is that a few people manages the economy to their own interest, and they allow the majority to suffer. You see, they don't take their country as a project whereby they have to develop the economy to the extent that it will be industrially active. You get it. If you look at the budget of most African countries, especially Nigeria, you realize that 70% of that budget is on recurrent expenditure, whereas just 30% is for capital projects. Now, how do you put so much of your fund, of your budget, into recurrent expenditure? Why? Because that is where government is going to siphon money, into their individual bank account to take care of themselves and members of their family, and of course the cabal that put them into power. And that is what is playing out. And that is why you see when most world leaders, e.g. like Trump or US, is saying that Africa is, we use the term, yes.
And of course they apologize for using that term.
Oh my God, fine, you apologize, but the point is it the truth or not? The answer is yes, it's the truth. Because the indicators are clear. What is wrong with African leaders? So this is the problem. So when you now start talking about reparation, exploitation, and all that, I think we have to examine ourselves, examine our leaders very well. Have they done the right thing? Because if you have a straight, a workable economic policy or program, the white man cannot cheat you. After all, a country like Nigeria is loaded with a lot of educated people, experts in different fields and areas. But the issue is that when it now comes to putting these people into position that will develop our infrastructure, develop our economic base, they don't do that. Rather, they don't employ technocrats. They put fellow politicians into positions, okay, that it's like Father Christmas approach, to administration, so that at the end of the day you see the wrong people in the wrong places. So you cannot give what you don't have. That is the issue. I don't want to sound as if I'm supporting a particular political party. You remember the case of Ngozi Iweala, the World Bank material. When the world had economic meltdown, everybody was shouting, Nigeria will go down the drain and all that. She was able to manage the economy. Well, what did the administration say that on Jonathan? Jonathan said, look, and the woman said, I must maintain my dollar salary. And everybody was shouting, why? Why should she not take the Naira thing that every other person? I said, look, I want to resort. This lady is an expert, and we need her expertise. I don't know if we're communicating. And as a result, he employed her as a technocrat, not as a politician. Okay. And we got the result.
Okay.
But in the present administration, is that the issue? No, that's not the case. They were employing politicians just to satisfy political interests.
All right. Right now, we don't want to delve into that politician and all that, though they are incorporated into this topic. We don't want to take it into partisan politics, okay? But you've made a very strong point: leadership, exploitation, data, and of course, leadership. But you get to find out that these countries, people like who want to help Africa, they give loans, they give grants,
exactly.
They give us everything to come up. Then what is our problem? Exactly. And we are still blaming them.
Yes.
Well, you know, the problem is it comes to attitude. You see, if you talk with any businessman, they will tell you, or in any country, taking of loans is sometimes a necessary venture. It is what you do with the loan. A businessman, a sole entrepreneur, for example, who goes to the bank and takes a loan to do the mother's burial or to marry a fourth wife is destined for failure. But if you take a loan to expand your business, employ more labor, invest in new machinery, you are therefore investing in productivity and creating an environment that is likely to create income that will allow you to pay the interest on your loan. So when we look at Africa, for example, you see these foreign bodies and foreign companies and foreign financial institutions see Africa as the most viable region. This is established universally. However, they also know that we have a penchant for luxury living. So they come and they give us these loans, knowing that we are going to misuse them and that we are going to have difficulty in paying back. Therefore, we go into economic slavery. They don't want the money, but they want our resources. So when you are now paying for these loans and you are using oil to pay, you are using tin to pay, you are using copper to pay, you are using gold to pay, what you are doing is depleting your resources that your country has, the God-given resources. So if at the end of the day, you are also not producing, because we are not a producing continent, really. We are a consuming continent. So if you are not producing, you are not exporting, how are you then going to increase your GDP? If you are not increasing your GDP, or you have a less than adequate GDP in terms of your borrowing, it means that you are always going to be in loss and not in profit. And once you are in loss, then you cannot start to even make infrastructural plans for infrastructural development. And as Prof has just told us, and we know, if with all of these constraints, you have 70% as recurrent expenditure, exactly, my brother, you are going to fail. Yeah. So it is not rocket science. So at times I am bewildered when I see, people who they are vying, they want to be president, they want to be governor, and don't understand this basic economics. You see, we have special advisors in government, secretary to special advisor, senior special assistant. These people are all politicians. A person like Prof now should not be here. He should be busy advising somebody in Abuja. You see, a special assistant is somebody who is a specialist in a particular field. So like the president is going to America now, he will take somebody like Prof and say, look, we are going to discuss A, B, and C. Yeah. Now, give me the specifics on this area. This is what I want to discuss with Trump. Prof will give him the data. He will give him the analysis. He will draw the conclusions. And he will give him just those maybe 7 lines that he must deliver to Trump. And he will get it. You see, that is the position of a special assistant. We don't understand that. We don't know what a special assistant is supposed to do. If you have legal issues, maybe somebody needs to be extradited, or there's an issue with people who have been arrested, issue with international terrorism, you need a legal expert. Yeah. So you will go to one of our universities, get a professor, appoint him as your special assistant on legal issues. he will give you the entire so no president needs to know it all, but you must be an effective manager. An effective manager knows how to get talent, how to get technocrats in his team. In Africa, you look at a lot of our leaders in Africa, they are always getting their family members.
That's it.
You will get your wife's brother, yes, your wife's uncle, yes, your brother, your sister, in-law, your in-law. These are the people that make up your cabinet, or your old pals. Yes. So we continue to recycle. If you look at all across Africa, we are just recycling people who NAFDAC will not certify because they have passed their sell-by date. So we keep recycling these people.
That's a good one.
So at the end of the day, all we have in power are those who their NAFDAC numbers have expired. But those are the leaders. Then tomorrow they will tell you that the youths are lazy. How will the youth not be lazy if they've not been given the opportunity to learn, to be mentored, and to be given the opportunity to learn how to be leaders?
All right. I'll come back to you. Now, he has raised a very strong point. Despite the loans, the grant, even sometimes the freebies given to African nations, still it's like it's been sunk into kind of an abyss, so to speak, because we don't see anything coming out from it. But like saying that whenever these countries that are interested, seemingly interested to raise Africa to an enviable height, whenever they see a particular nation in Africa progressing, they tend to scuttle the progress. They tend to be a clog in the wheel of progress by either removing a particular person that seems to be responsible for that great change in that particular region. Would you want to agree to this school of thought?
Well, I think I'm sure you are looking at perhaps a one-off situation like Gaddafi, perhaps. Yeah. But the truth remains, we have a very defective recruitment process, leadership recruitment process in Africa. And for that reason, oftentimes we find the wrong persons in offices. If you go to the Western world and other developed climes, leadership is never accidental. It's a well thought out process, and there are institutions for leadership grooming. If you look at, for instance, the last over 20 prime ministers of the United Kingdom, it's either they were at Harvard, either at Cambridge or Oxford. Yeah. And if you look at the last 20 presidents of the United States, it's either they must have attended at least one of the Ivy League universities. And majority of them are even lawyers accidentally.
And with track records.
With track records. And how do they do this? For instance, at Oxford, there's even a debating society, a club. And it's a highly prestigious one. If you go to the House of Parliament in the UK, majority of the people you will find there were people who were hitherto members of that debating society, because they are filled with social, economic, and political issues. They do research and they debate from their very tender age. They have their primary school, secondary school, and universities for grooming leaders, potential leaders for the future, for the economy, for the political sphere, and of course, for the social sphere. So leadership is never accidental. But if you come to Nigeria, for instance, till date we still have people struggling with certificates.
Yes.
It's appalling. Because if I take my age back to when I went to school, it was just like pretty normal that I had to go to a primary, secondary school and university. I don't know how it was going to be different from the home that I came from. It couldn't have been different. So I'm thinking, if I'm having somebody with such defective or skilled background not claiming to be my leader, then we can't go too far. We can't go too far. Then you are talking about loans, grants to Africa. That was in time past. The global economic ideology is fast changing. People are living globalization and living it as global cooperation to nationalist tendencies. That's why you hear Trump say America first.
And isolationism.
Yeah, no, not isolationism. That's why there's still...
That is where the conundrum between Trump now and Macron.
But guess what? There is still global cooperation to the extent that when there was going to be strike in Syria, they brought in the United Kingdom and France to partner. That is to the extent they cooperate, globally. But when a Trump now is going to meet with a President Buhari today, you are not coming with an empty plate because nothing is going to your plate. You need to tell me how many jets you just paid for.
Exactly.
How much have you put into the American economy before we discuss, or you don't even get an appointment? That is why the United Kingdom is saying, no, wait a minute. I like the EU, but we just want to be outside. We want to take care of ourselves. We want to seal our borders. We don't want, it's not going to be an all-comers affair anymore. But what is the African agenda? What is the Nigerian agenda? What is our plan for the next 20 years? What are we even looking at? What are our economic policies?
All right.
You understand? You said the Chinese are all over the place. But have you bothered to look at the terms of doing business with Africa? For instance, if the Chinese are giving you $1 billion for a project as a loan, you are going to have to use a Chinese company to execute on their terms. So at the end of the day, the money goes back to China. They leave you with a turnkey project.
This is what I was explaining.
Because they have to come back to fix anytime it goes bad.
Wow.
Which means you are hooked on them. And because you are hooked on them, then the relationship must continue, because the Bible will say the hand of the giver will always be on the top of the hand of the receiver.
Right.
So that leaves Africa beggarly.
Okay, leaving Africa beggarly. Why the way you're talking is like you have some more light to throw into the ideas. Could you please continue from where you stopped?
You see, in a normal administration of a country, for a government that is serious under a democratic sector, you ought to have what you call a think tank.
You mean African nations don't have think tank?
Most of them don't have think tank. A think tank is a team made up of experts in different, like my friend was trying to illustrate, made up of experts in various fields. I get in it. Think tank is made up of experts from agric, the economy, law, mention it, engineering, all sorts of areas. So this think tank is like a reservoir where the president will derive his policies from. You know, they advise the president on various issues concerning the country, okay? And not a showcase of former leaders coming to Aso Rock where they will be served, they serve 5 alive and a bottle of water, pure water. And after that, they are giving envelopes and they shake hands and say, oh, it's long I've seen you and all that and all that. That is not the issue. In that place, we ought to have a think tank that will articulate the problem of this country. What is going on? In fact, before any problem occurs, that's what we call strategic management. Before any problem occurs, they ought to have seen it and don't even allow it to occur. But here we don't have, most African leaders, they don't have what we call think tank. What we have is a think tank of political patronage or patronizers. That's what we have. What role did you play during my election? like one president was asked, I don't want to mention his name, but the president is very close to us. And he was asked, yes, how come Niger Delta, people of Niger Delta are suffering and you've not done much? He said, people of Niger Delta, okay, only 5% of them voted for me. The other people over there, 95% voted for me. So what do you expect? That's why development is not going on. Is that the issue? Second question, the most current. Well, this African Commonwealth business team, we want to see how we can collaborate, work together, how it possible have a common economic policy, currency, and all that. What do you do? Okay. Answer. Nigeria population is about 180 million.
Oh, come on, prof. Fact. Yes, come back now.
So the issue is that we are talking about leadership. That's what we're talking about, wasting. We're not out of place. And at the end of the day, we started hearing answers like lazy people, they don't want to work because does it rhyme with the question? So don't forget, our focus here is leadership. That's what we are saying. Then coming back to the loan we're talking about, if you don't have a leader that is well articulate, okay, doesn't have economic think tank that will work with him, because resources are getting scarce relative to demand. You know, there's economic meltdown over the whole place. So nations are trying to use this capacity utilization. They want to use the best of their resources, but we're not getting that. Okay, so how do you expect such leaders to manage loans that have been given by these donor nations? And even before then, the donor nations will be warning them, this economic policy you are on is bad. Insecurity is bad. And let me tell you what, before any reasonable investor comes to a country to invest, they must consider some parameters. One, is the economy, is the country stable? Is the economy stable? Do they have figures like my colleagues were saying? Do they have data on what is going population and what's the consumer price index, all those? They're going to ask all those questions. Okay. Have they solved their domestic internal problems, including political wrangling and all that? Because they don't want to put their money where their money will disappear.
Okay, all right. I'll come back to you, Post. Like, we're just hitting on our continent. This is not there, that is not there. Well, you are giving very strong and cogent points that people should listen to and really work on. But now he made a statement in the Economic Business Forum. He talked about us working together.
Yes.
At least to enhance Africa economy and security. Now, it's like they're coming with good intention. But are we really ready to partner with them to take Africa out of the dungeon?
Wilson, I've said before on this forum somewhere that whenever any country is coming to Africa to come and do business, please, Africans, understand they are not coming for your benefit. Any country coming to Africa to do business with Africa, their first priority is how they are going to get their return on their investment.
Very correct.
African leaders need to understand this. When they come to your country, like we talked about the Chinese. You know, I mentioned the Chinese at the beginning of this discussion, and you said I should hold on. When the Chinese come to your country, for example, all over Africa now, they are Chinese. There's no country you go to where you don't have Chinese everywhere. When they come, as Prof said now, there's an agreement. That agreement, if you read it properly, you see our leaders just sign anything.
They just sign.
Oh, yes.
From your own perspective.
Let me give you an example, because I like to break things down.
All right.
If I'm a landlord and I am executing a tenancy agreement with my tenant, as a landlord, shouldn't I read that agreement? Because if the agreement is telling me that in 12 years the tenant is going to take over ownership of my house, I should know. And if truly I signed such an agreement, it means I was sleeping when they drafted that agreement, and I did not vet it, or my legal team did not vet it, or my legal team were compromised in letting me agree to that situation. Let me break it down again to the Chinese. Now, I was talking to you about, in Benin here, the Chinese company by the bypass. I cannot imagine that a local content policy document was drafted for that company when they came into Edo State. Because you should have said to somebody in that Chinese company, you are going to employ a minimum of X% of Edo State indigenes. Not only employ, they will be at various cadre, various parts of the hierarchy of that industry. They will be in management, they will be in admin, they will be in security, they will be in procurement, they will be on the shop floor, they will be on security. Presently, you will only see Nigerians working as security guard in these companies. They bring all the workers from China, both legally and illegally. They bring them in here. At the end of the day, I told you just now about 4.3% of investment returns that we get. So in that company, for example, imagine all the money they make there, making tires and everything. Power is pumped directly to them. The reason why we are getting 3 hour in Benin today is because the Discourse are supplying these people.
You don't have to okay, fine. Let's go to Africa now.
Well, Nigeria is in Africa.
Yeah.
And these things are replicated in every country in Africa. Let us be honest. I'm not talking, listen, you know when I talk, I'm very objective. I don't talk APC, I don't talk PDP. We are just talking Nigeria. These things have been happening before Buhari came. So let us be honest with ourselves. We have been doing this thing. Now, that Chinese company is giving back to Nigeria or Edo State, let's say 4.3%. So the remaining 95.6% or whatever goes back to China. This is the truth. And no government has sat down with these people to say, you know what, we need to be getting more. Either you reinvest the money back in Nigeria, go and find another industry, develop another industry, employ more of us. If they are putting all this profit back into Nigeria, you are going to find that very soon our youth will be employed. People will not need to be leaving this country. They will still make their money. And the reason why Nigeria or Africa is still the greatest investment point for the whole world is this point. They get all their money from here and they take it back. And no government is sitting down to have a local content policy to make sure that they protect their people, that their people are given jobs. And somebody is mandated to do this job of making sure we get the best out of our own resources. What is that person doing?
All right, hold on now. You give it maybe after.
Information.
I know. Just hold on. Okay. You just put it somewhere at the back of your mind to come up later when it gets to your turn. He talked about local content. Don't forget what happened in Zimbabwe when Robert Mugabe wanted to say, look, you guys hands off. Let us control our resources. Let us run our companies. More like saying that the company went on the ground. That will lack effective management in Africa. Is that one of the problems?
Well, yeah, we do lack effective, management skills.
And just to add to it, hold on, I'm coming just to add to it. Well, like I said, I had to be that the colonial masters, so to speak, stayed longer. That would urge them to leave. Things should have been better.
Well, I don't want to agree with that because if you look at South Africa, the blacks are still pretty much impoverished. The economy is still very much in the firm grip of the white people over there. So, but if you look at Africa, sometimes I wonder when we have an African business forum, when you have the African Development Bank, I keep wondering, what is the plan? What is the focus? What is the agenda? Why did you set up that bank? Is it to brandish for subsistence, living, survival techniques, or for African prosperity and emancipation? If you look, some months ago, I was listening to the French President Emmanuel Macron talk about Africa. I was amazed that he was reeling out figures concerning Africa's future more than I've ever heard from African leaders themselves. To the extent he was talking to Europeans on the need to prepare for post-oil Africa, especially Nigeria, where he said that over 80% of the natural resources in Africa in the next 30 to 40 years would have been depleted. And therefore, they need to evolve a strategy in Europe, economic strategy, on what to do next. And they need to move faster on their the development of electric cars. They need to move faster in areas where they are currently relying on the use of resources from Africa. But we, who even have the resources, are not even planning for post those resources era. That is where what brings my mind back to data. Because if people are telling you the makers of the petroleum cars now, even though we have it now and we are still struggling because we have to import the same product that we own and it's right underneath our soil, the people that don't even have it, who don't live here, because of their companies, who are almost like doing economic espionage activities for them, have found out from their gauge what is left underneath the soil and how long it will last. And so what's next? What's next means, if you look at the whole of Africa, for instance, go to northern Nigeria. For instance, I'll just bring it in because if you look at this, the issue of northern Nigeria goes all the way through Niger Republic to Libya. What is going on there? Desertification. Desertification means we are losing arable lands, and therefore, because we have cow or cattle that graze, they have to keep pushing down south. Because they are pushing down south, a combination of factors are taking place. I asked myself, and I asked viewers, and of course, now we have three issues in Nigeria. We have the militancy issue from the Niger Delta, because anytime the federal government says anything that is unpalatable to them, they issue a deadline, which means they are still there. They have the capacity to incapacitate Nigeria's oil production. Then we have an insurgent group, which is the Boko Haram, who were fighting as an insurgent group, and they still are. Yeah. Now we now even have a terrorist group, which are the headsmen. But sadly, we do not even have a comprehensive counter-insurgency strategy on how to fight. First of all, you don't draft the military. That's not their training. The military were trained to defend Nigeria's territorial integrity and not to harm fellow citizens. Who are these people? So now, for you to evolve as Africa, we need to sit down and ask ourselves.
All right.
I'm sure we are running out of time, bro.
Strong signal. Was a Wilson quality rap right now. I'm so sorry, but you're going to give us that information that you want to give to us. Are you going to be the one to have the last line on this show? Because we have just barely minutes to go.
Yes, the information I want to give is very, very simple.
All right.
Now we are talking about we are being exploited. You like colonial masters, advanced nation, and all that.
Yeah.
Now, do we have the expertise on ground? Do we have experts in various areas? Engineering, mentioning, medicine, mentioning. Of course we have. But the problem is that the talents of these people are nowhere harnessed. You know, that is the issue. They are nowhere harnessed. We have what we call medical tourism that is going on now. Why can't we highly equip our teaching hospitals? So that because we have, if you go to a place like UBTH, we have doctors in every area of specialization. Why can't we equip these hospitals so that the foreign exchange that has been wasted outside can remain in the system?
Thank you.
So we have the problem. So it's not a case of exploitation.
So we have the problem.
A lot of bad economic problems, which is a fallout of bad leadership.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We can just go on and on, but our time is up. I just have to see if it's like, telling us to really wrap up. If it's like correct, but man, the man is right. We don't have time anymore. We have to call it a wrap right now. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your wonderful analysis. You've heard them. We are our problem. We really want to enhance our economy and, of course, our security. We have to do the right thing at the right time with the right reasons and, of course, resources put in place so that everything can just go on smoothly. Well, tomorrow on the International Forum, we're taking a look at the romance, so to speak, between the Northern Korean Peninsula and, of course, Southern Korean Peninsula. What is it going to lead to? That will be for tomorrow. For now, it's goodbye.